Welcome in. This is 300 Yards to Unknown. I'm Rick Gehman, and today I've got a very special one that seems to be on the top of my mind every single year. Finally getting to chat with one of the men behind the official 100 greatest golf courses on planet Earth, or maybe it's just America. We're going to find out. Steve Hennessey is here from Golf Digest. Steve, I am absolutely stoked to finally talk through this. It is something I see every single year, and to be able to pick your brain on it is very, very exciting.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's a project that's near and dear to my heart. And as we were talking off air, you've been checking off all the courses that you've played and making plans for the ones you haven't. So I think most people are doing that once the new list comes out. So it's an exciting time for Golf Digest.
Yeah, before we even jump into that, I mean, you're managing editor at Golf Digest. You host the Be Right Pod, which is, first of all, one of the greatest podcast names out there, by the way. And it's a great podcast in itself. But like, the name alone goes so far in the podcast game. So I love that. But how much of your time goes into the 100 greatest courses compared to kind of everything else that's happening?
Yeah, obviously you and I work a lot together on the gambling stuff. You do our DFS column for golfdigest.com. You contribute to our expert picks, but most of my time is devoted to this 100 greatest panel. It's a lot of coordination and efforting. And the list only comes out every other year, our 100 greatest and 100 greatest public. But it's a year-long process with coordinating our panelists, talking to golf courses themselves, managing all that goes into it. So with all of my duties, I'd say this is about a third of it. And then I'm also editing all of our play content at golfdigest.com. So that's what to play. So equipment, where to play the golf courses, and how to play instructions. So, and then the other third is the gambling stuff, which is also near and dear to my heart. But the golf course stuff is so much fun. I've gotten a chance to work on it the last 5 or 6 years, and I've really kind of soaked it all up, and it's something I don't want to give up. And I've, done, even as I've taken on more and more roles, I've, been reluctant to give this up because it's kind of my favorite thing at Golf Digest.
I have to admit, I mean, there was a time, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago when really everything was going digital, when publications, traditional print media were having trouble getting online and keeping the content going. And you would see a lot of magazines or a lot of print publications just dying off. And I think if you would have asked me, Steve, 6, 7, 8 years ago, what's going to happen with Golf Digest, I'm not sure how optimistic I would have been just from seeing what everyone else has done. You guys pump some of the best content. The storytelling is great. The obviously for me, embracing kind of the gambling side of it, like just hats off, kudos to you guys for putting out some really compelling stuff.
Appreciate that. Yeah, it's cool because I got involved like on the front end of it, like you said, when things, who knew what the digital appetite was going to be for, this sort of storytelling. But we just have some really bright minds at Golf Digest, and people that are so much fun to brainstorm with. And, we have a lot of our efforts are a lot on digital at this time. But, the magazine is first and foremost, it's storytelling for that. And then we figure out ways to kind of expand it digitally. And, I think we figured out a content mix that's worked. A lot of the kind of virally type posts that get a lot of clicks. That's a lot of fun, all the Bryson Brooks stuff, obviously. But, the bread and butter of Golf Digest has always been the what to play, how to play, and where to play. And, and then also the feature type stuff, where we go kind of deep into, telling the stories of golf. So, we try to do it all, and we try to do it all well. So I'm glad to hear you say that we do a decent job at it.
I think so. Do you get pushback from like I always throw my dad under the bus on this, like my dad, like right, who watches golf, recreationally on Saturdays and Sundays and picks up Golf Digest at the doctor's office. Like, do you get pushback from those people when it comes to the gambling, the fantasy side of it, and more of that viral content of like, what has Bryson said today? Right.
Yeah, I would say when we first started doing the gambling content, we got some pushback, like, we don't care about this stuff. We want more of the, instruction type stuff. Help me play better golf. But it's very interesting. And this is the 4th season that gambling has been legalized. Yeah. Even the the average golf fan, is kind of interested in, what someone's odds are, even if they're not gambling yet. That's the goal, to get them to kind of dabble. But, they're interested that Jon Rahm has, the lowest odds of anyone since Tiger Woods in 2013. Like that's just an interesting stat. It adds to their enjoyment of golf. And I think and it also speaks to how big gambling is generally. Like, you can't watch TV if you're in a state where gambling is legal without being hit by advertisements. So I think that has to do with it too. But I think that stigma, obviously, of gambling is gone. And so in that regard, that's definitely true. And in terms of like the viral stuff, I would say even someone like your dad, he might not think he's interested in what Bryson said today, but he might click the article. And, even if he spends 20 seconds on it, he wants to be in the know, because when he goes and plays golf with his buddies, he wants to know what everyone's talking about. So, that's the idea around our content mix. And, our average age, interestingly, is still kind of that older audience. So, even though we're doing sort of this younger content mix, it's hitting that wider demographic.
I love it. I love it. Well, 1/3 of your time gets allocated to the 100 greatest golf courses. So this is America's 100 greatest. And then my favorite list is the public courses. We'll get to that in just 1 second. But the word greatest, Steve, I imagine there are many ways to define that. And I imagine that you guys on the panel, how big is the panel approximately? Yeah,
so we have over 1,900 course panelists across the U.S. and Canada.
I thought you were going to say like 6 people decide this.
That's the stigma of it, that, it's a smoke-filled room with a couple cigars and, Pebble Beach. No, this is a very scientific method. So.
All right. So I imagine 1,900 people kind of treat the word greatest a little bit differently. Do you work off of specific criteria? Is it like, hey, this is a noteworthy course, this is more about architecture? Like, just give us an idea, and we can go through them one by one, because I think they're kind of fascinating. Like, what are some of the factors that go into this?
Yeah. So there are 8 sets of criteria with definitions that our panelists evaluate courses on, and they give each one a grade from 1 to 10, and basically we take the average of all those scores at the end of a period, and that determines our rankings. It has nothing to do with what Golf Digest thinks. Like, even though I manage the panel, I don't evaluate the courses. Derek Duncan, who's our architecture editor, he doesn't evaluate the courses. It's all democratic. It's by our panelists, which kind of separates us from others. But yeah, I mean, some of the definitions, that wouldn't surprise people, are shot options. So, a risk reward factor of a golf course, and each hole, challenge. So how difficult, while still being fair, is the golf course, layout variety, conditioning, obviously, which conditioning, to the normal golfer probably means just in really good shape and nice and green. But in our definition, it's how firm, fast, and rolling are the fairways, how receptive are the greens, and how true are the rolls of the putts. So we've really embraced like brown is the new green, and water conservation and all that. So yeah, there's eight definitions, and we actually introduced a new one 3 years ago. It's our fun definition, because we know that what people talk about the most after they play a golf course is, do they have fun? Do they want to go back to it? I think that's what a lot of people identify as great, or some people do.
That's what I think is so interesting, Steve, is like, if you, I play a lot of golf. I play 2 or 3 times a week. I play guys all over the place. I don't know if you gave me like a report card or a grading system. Like, I don't know how good I would be at that. I think that I would take a more Rotten Tomatoes approach to it, which is like, I either recommend it or I don't, or whatever. Right. So I think even starting to try to think about courses differently. So when you're talking about, shot options, for example, does a course that allows you to hit all the clubs in your bag, does that somehow, in some people's vision, kind of get graded higher than just a driver wedge course? Is that kind of, am I on the right track here? Yeah, pretty much. I would say options is the most, that's the biggest part of the definition probably, and a variety. So, you don't want, like you said, a golf course that's just driver wedge every time, or, dog legs in a certain direction, or, you don't. All 4 par 3s are 140 yards or something like that, right? Yeah. And in different directions too. I guess that's part of layout variety. But the shot options is actually double those other categories. So we think that's
that's most important. But what you said, Rick, I think that's interesting, because when I started, managing the course panel, I was kind of like you, like I wasn't even thinking that way. And I think most public golfers are not thinking in terms of these definitions and, understanding course design. It's really something, when you immerse yourself in it, it really adds to your level of enjoyment in golf. Because then all of a sudden, if your game kind of stinks, like there's something else to focus on. It's
I can appreciate the architecture.
Yeah, exactly. Studying the architecture, and if you have an understanding of what architects are thinking about, kind of the history of architecture, it really does add a level of enjoyment that when I started, I didn't even know was possible.
So design and architecture, that is certainly, it has to be the aspect that the recreational player, the casual, that consider the least, and whether they are not playing on courses that are being, like there's a ton of Pete Dye designs out there, and they're well thought out, and they're more accessible to kind of the public. But like, what are the things that we should be looking for if people want to go out and play a golf course and they want to start seeing it through the eyes of how could this be graded for the 100 greatest golf courses? Like what things should we be looking at architecture wise? You mentioned one that I think is interesting, and this might be more design. And I remember this was with, I think Kiowa had this, which is all four of the par threes went in different directions, which means if the wind's blowing in one direction, you're never getting like the same wind. What other stuff should we be looking at here?
Yeah. To me, it's like the individualness of each hole and how they stand out against the others. So I think that's something, you might think about if you're an average golfer, but when you sit back and think about it, I think that distinguishes a really great golf course from another one. Is, when I think about the golf course after the round and all the holes, like when you add them up, how varied and different are they? I think that's something that, maybe not everyone thinks about. Character is also a definition that's, just exuding uniqueness, again, kind of distinguishing a golf course from others of its era. So I think those are a couple things. And really, what I did was I read a couple books. I read, Tom Doak's books. I read a book by George Thomas, a really old one from the 1920s. And that really helped me understand like what an architect was thinking about back then. And the crazy thing is, they were thinking about the same things that architects are now. And, when you think about courses that have been remodeled, et cetera, like a lot of the times they're going back to the original design because it was really good. And, they were thinking in such a way to help the enjoyment of the golfer. So those are a bunch of things that I think really add to the level of enjoyment of the game.
How much access do you or other panelists have to some of these places? Because when you talk about America's 100 greatest golf courses, number one, Pine Valley. Number two, Augusta National. Like these are not, I can't just like walk up to them and say, hey guys, I'd like to take a little peek under the hood. Like, how are you assembling information from some of the most exclusive clubs on planet Earth?
Yeah, that's a very common question. And most of our panelists are not accessing those courses as a panelist. So, a lot of our panelists are, well-to-do and they're well-connected in the industry. So they're just invited as guests of those clubs, because if you're a Golf Digest panelist and you call up Pine Valley or Augusta or Cypress or Shinnecock, they're not going to answer your call. They're not going to answer that email. They don't really care as much about our course rankings as some of the courses lower on the list, or at least they say that. At least I think their members sort of care a little bit. But
I imagine that helps. They can raise the dues a little bit when you're number one on the rankings. However many years in a row.
Yeah, especially when you talk about the state list, that's certainly true. The top of the list, those clubs, they'll be around forever. But yeah, I mean, those panelists just play as guests of members. When you talk about courses lower on the list, we maintain a list of. We have 1,900 or 2,000 or so courses that are our candidates for any of our lists. So best in state, 100 greatest public, 100 greatest, second 100 greatest. And we maintain those contacts. Panelists reach out as a panelist. And sometimes they're accommodated, sometimes they're not. There's very strict rules that we apply to our panel. And, we have a zero tolerance policy. If someone, doesn't adhere to those policies, they get a call from Steve Hennessey or Derek Duncan, and they are no questions asked to be removed from the panel. Which
How often does that happen?
It happens more than you think.
Wow.
And you know me, I'm not great at being a bad cop, but my predecessor, Ron Whitten, who was the longtime architecture editor at Golf Digest, he was a much better bad cop. I played good cop, but now Derek and I kind of have to split those duties. And yeah, there's been some interesting stories over the years of us having to remove panelists for doing all sorts of stuff. So it definitely happens.
I mean, we don't need to go into the gory details, but is it like not respecting the course? Like what kind of things can get you kicked off the panel?
Gosh, well, I mean, even something as simple as asking to have a foursome of you and three buddies, that's strictly against our rules. You're allowed to ask to bring one guest with you, but when you're starting to bring a full foursome, that looks like you're doing it just for access and not for actually studying the golf course. But you would be surprised what happens sometimes. We had, I probably shouldn't go into all the stories, but guys getting too drunk at a golf course. Guys saying that, hey, can you just charge my lunch back to the Golf Digest account at a private club? Like, buddy, that doesn't exist. We don't have an account at every private club in America.
I appreciate the effort, but that is so stupid.
Yes. It happens. It definitely happens quite a bit. So.
Amazing. Well, okay. So I want to, you mentioned a couple of the other lists. I love the states list, right? So this is, I mean, I use it all the time. My wife and I were just in Utah a couple of weeks ago. Right after we booked that, I pulled up like, okay, top courses in Utah. Which ones can I get to? First of all, Utah is a very big state. They're all over the place, but I found a couple that we could make happen, which I love. But I think maybe, and this one hasn't, I'm not sure if this has always been around. When did the public courses list get created? Because the 100 greatest courses goes back to 1966, I believe.
Correct. 66.
Okay. So when did the public courses, that feels much more recent.
It was, yeah, that's since 2003. So, and Pebble Beach has been #1 on that since then. But yeah, that list, there's a lot more evolution to that. Whereas the 100 greatest, like, it's harder for a club to move up or down on that list. But the public list, I'm with you. That's probably my most fun list to kind of study and go over, because all of our readers, for the most part, are able to access those courses. So it's great.
The barrier, whether it's a $600 greens fee or whatever, the barrier is just that. It's not an initiation, a membership. You got to be referred by somebody. You don't have to jump through all these hoops. But there are certainly different types of public courses. Shadow Creek comes to mind, right? If I remember correctly, you got to stay at an MGM property. You have to pay I think they're raising the price to $1,000 here per round shortly. Still technically a public course because you do not need a membership to go on it, correct?
Right. Yeah. And the limo back and forth from the course. I've gotten to do that a couple of times. It's really great, but obviously, 98% of our readers will not have that experience. So, I understand it.
But it is this list is a list of courses that your readers could have an experience on, and I know I mean, listen, I intentionally wore my Kapalua shirt because that is number 23, the Plantation course, Kapalua. These are much more accessible. Now, was that the idea when you released this list in 2003 that, like, hey, we need something else. We need something for, I don't want to say the common man, but like me, we need something for me that is much more attainable.
Yeah, it really is. It's, we always had the state lists, I think. And there was just the appetite for what are the best courses that I could play. Golf Digest had a franchise called Places to Play from the 90s and 2000s. And that actually assigned a star rating to every golf course in America. It was quite the undertaking. We had readers would literally mail in ballots that we would have in the magazine. They'd rip it out of the magazine. They'd mail it to us. We had, 5 or 6 staffers at Golf Digest taking the mail, documenting all the stars, the comments. And then we put together this publication of, the best golf courses in your area. And it had every golf course around. So it was basically the Yelp of golf courses back, in the 80s and 90s, which we're aiming to bring back. But I think that really spurred the public list because we saw, the feedback that we got from readers, like, there's really an interest of identifying greatness, even on that public level. And there obviously is, you look at course number 1, Pebble Beach, to number 100, Spring Creek in Virginia. Like, these are all great courses. And even if you extended it to the 200 best public courses, like, these are all courses that are really good and people enjoy every day. So that kind of distinguishes it from the list that's mostly private, the 100 greatest in general. So yeah, that's why it's my favorite, and it's one of our favorite projects at Golf Digest for sure.
Now, does the criteria change for the public courses, or is it exactly the same as
exactly
the
same?
courses?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So are you at all considering how hard it is to get on, or price, or it's straight? We are just talking about the golf course. We are not talking about anything else that kind of goes on around it. If they want to charge $1 million a round, or if they want to charge $1 a round, that's their thing. We're here to talk about the course.
Right. Yeah. It's strictly about the architecture and design of the course. Golf Digest kind of always tried to stay away from those things in terms of how much they're charged, their political things, different policies, et cetera. So yeah, it's just identifying the greatness of the golf course, and places to play was sort of that avenue that, if you thought the service was great, or, the food was really good, that's kind of the avenue there. But none of that matters in terms of identifying the best golf courses.
I imagine there is a subset of readers who make it their goal to play all of these courses, whether it is the greatest courses or whether it is the public courses. So how aware are you of those people? I feel like the people that do this are telling you that they're doing it. Like, they reach out and they're like, oh, I've got 75 of them done, or whatever. Like, talk me through some of these really ambitious readers who are trying to cross off all of these.
Yeah, it's kind of an area. It's a very small group of people, certainly, but the people who are trying to play all 100 of our 100 greatest, or the public list, it's really an interesting world. And we had a gentleman a couple years ago named Jimmy James. He was retired, from, I think, ExxonMobil maybe, and he ended up playing all 100 greatest in 1 year. Wow. Incredible. And he was not someone with a bunch of private club connections, but, through his business world, he was able to make connections and play all of them as a guest. So, there are few of those stories, but that was someone who was featured in Golf Digest. In terms of our panel, like, we kind of dissuade that, because we want our panelists to really go out and play like the hidden gems and the courses no one's really heard of. Like, we have enough people going to play Shinnecock and Oakmont and Marion. Like, we don't really care if you're like endeavoring to play those courses. It's great. Like, I have a panelist who completed their top 100 this year, and he's become a friend, and was genuinely interested in the last courses he had to check off. But in general, we don't like that kind of list chasing mentality. We would rather you not be in that mentality and go play the number 50 course in Minnesota, because that's going to help us more. Not as much of our panel goes and plays those courses.
That's what so that's my next question is, you have this list that once you have the list, the panelists can't really ignore the list, right? They know the list exists. So is there some type of list bias where there might be a course like, let's see, I talked about Shadow Creek. Number 6 on the public course list, Pinehurst, number 2. I imagine that's not going anywhere anytime soon. And it's not because it's on the list, but how much turnover are we seeing from the top 100 on any of these lists, or even the state list? Because once it's been assigned a spot, is it hard to lose that spot? How much turnover do we see?
Yeah, interesting question. I would say that there has to be some level of bias. That's kind of the toughest job for us as Golf Digest, is to remove that bias. And we kind of teach and educate our panelists that, we don't care where a course was previously. Like, we want your scores based on your understanding of our criteria. And we do have a statistician at the end of a period grade them in terms of, he applies an outlier analysis in terms of all of their evaluations. So if they're, really plus or minus, I think it's 2 standard deviations, those scores are removed. So that does, but so it does make it harder for a course to go up or down in a way, but it also removes the possibility of someone, having a terrible experience at X course and giving them all 1s, and then all of a sudden the course goes down. But yeah, I mean, it's also a level of data. Like Pinehurst number 2, we have 300 evaluations over 10 years. We store data there. So it is tougher to move up or down because there's just so much data. You understand, as a data guy, like it's tough to go up or down when you have that much consistent data. So that's an interesting part of it. And I think, you could debate forever, and people debate whether courses are, overrated or underrated, but that's kind of the beauty of our list, that, there's no perfect list. It's everyone has an opinion. But us, we establish those criteria so that our panelists kind of have to remove their opinion from it. It's whether they really do that in coming up with their scores. That's the toughest part for us.
Yeah, there will be no perfect list. I certainly understand that, but I honestly, even learning the way that you guys do it was much more complicated and complex. And like, I literally thought there were 5 people in a Golf Digest conference room saying, well, Pine Valley was number 1 2 years ago. Maybe it should just be number, like, I had no idea. So,
in 1968 there was, but in 2021, we have our criteria, thanks to Ron Whitten in the 80s for coming up with them. And we've, kind of innovated off of them. But yeah, it's very scientific, and I knew you would appreciate it as someone so into the data as you are.
I'm stunned. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm very excited about it. Are there things that are not currently part of the criteria that you envision at some point in the future might be added? Like do you think there are any blind spots or some things that might be overlooked or underlooked in this process?
That's a great question. I would say our fun definition is something that I would like to see have a little more value. It's something that we're debating at Golf Digest. It's currently not counted toward our evaluations because it's so new. We just don't have enough data on it yet to know whether we could really assign it in our rankings. But, in all the conversations I have with architects and just golfers, like, that's always something that comes up, is the fun part, like we talked about before. So to me, I would like to see that have a little more relevance in the future of our rankings.
Yeah, fun is interesting because I can get my butt kicked and shoot 110 and have a blast, right? There are courses that have just beat me in the head, and I'm still having fun because I understand, like, hey, this is challenging. And the word that you mentioned earlier, Steve, was fair. Right? Yes. How fair is it? To me, and again, I would be one of 1900. My singular opinion probably doesn't matter, but like, to me, a fair course is one where good shots are rewarded and bad shots are punished. That's kind of it, right? Mm-hmm. Is that what you see as fair when you're kind of grading all of these courses?
Yeah, and it's everyday play. So even someone who's higher handicap, has a chance to run up shots, a green that has, an opening in front. So, you could play the shot along the ground. That's something architects were thinking about back in the 20s. The options, so that kind of those shot options that plays into that. But yeah, I think it has to be fair. And that's something we really stress in our rankings, because I think there's a little stigma out there that our rankings are just like the championship courses of America, and it's how hard they are. But people don't understand that fair part is a huge part of our definition. So the more we could educate people on that, the better.
And really what you're seeing, and I understand that sentiment. If, you've got, I don't know, like what you're seeing at Shinnecock for a major championship is not what you're seeing at Shinnecock when you walk on there on a random Tuesday morning for recreation, right? I mean, it's just, I understand the mentality, but it's not the same.
Right. It's not, it is the same design. It's just like, the rough is really thick for the championships, and the fairway widths are brought in, and the green speeds, all of that people understand. But yeah, I mean, to your point before, like, to me, when I go play a Shinnecock or an Oakmont, I'm going to probably shoot 100, but I'm going to have a blast doing it because I understand the architecture is so great, and I understand the place the golf course has, in the history of the game. So I think that fun, I always go back to the fun aspect of it. And I like that. And I think most people do.
Do you have a favorite course? And I'm going to just say favorite. That can take that any way you want. Maybe it's a place you play all the time. Maybe it's a place that you've never played and you respect. Like, do you have a favorite course?
Gosh, it's a question I get so much, and I don't have
Does
a
it
great
change every 2 days?
Yeah, it definitely changes. I would say 3 courses that I consider, my favorites, and I rank them kind of similarly. It's Oakmont, it's Shinnecock, and I don't know. See, it does change all the time. Like, I got to play Baltusrol, which I now live down the street from Baltusrol, and I got to walk it with the designer, Gil Hans. Nice. That was like an otherworldly experience. And now that I live so close to it, and got that experience of Gil kind of walking me through all the changes at Baltusrol, like that's probably in my top 5 at least. But I've also gotten to play Pebble Beach. I've gotten very lucky, Rick. So it's really tough for me to say. Wingfoot, Chicago Golf Club is also up there.
I hear great things about Chicago Golf Club.
Yeah. And again, it's the access. It's so tough to get on it, but the architecture is so good. I wish more people had the chance to see it. So much goes into it. And Marion too. I didn't even mention Marion. That's usually Marion. My top 3. Yeah. Marion's great.
I played Marion, so I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and for high school golf, I can't even remember who the team was, but whatever team we played, their home course was Marion. And I remember, I didn't even really know at the time, but like I remember when we took vans to these matches, and our golf coach was like, if you do not do anything stupid. Like he didn't even care about golf. He's like, be on your best behavior. Like I don't care what you shoot, but like, don't screw this place up. Right.
Yeah,
like,
he probably wanted to, wanted to make sure his access to the club also was intact. Yeah,
exactly. I had something else. Oh, okay. So I'll get you out of here soon. Sorry. I'm just excited about this. Yeah. So you mentioned getting access to architects or guys that do redesigns. And one of the things that I think Golf Digest does an unbelievable job at is the Every Hole At series. So when you go on YouTube, and it's the drone flyover, and a lot of that comes with commentary about how the architect intended these holes to be played. And to me, that is a huge blind spot for the industry, right? Like I think people don't understand architecture or design because we're never told about it, right? It's never, and maybe people don't care, but like every time I hear something, I'm like, oh my God, that makes complete sense. Oh, the wind, the way that this is facing, and what, the options, like you mentioned, being able to run it up, being able to fly it in the air. Like, this is all so well thought out. Why aren't we talking about this more?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if, on TV, we need to have it more as part of the broadcast for the courses that the tour plays, or, it's something that we feel like, we're providing that education. We really only get to do it in our rankings, which come out every other year. So the more that it's talked about, the better. And yeah, those Every Hole At videos are tremendous. We've had like Jim Nance narrate the Cypress Point one, the Pebble Beach one. They're also good. Sandhills, Tara Eady down in New Zealand. I mean, it's just you could spend hours just watching them, and I have. It's my job.
Yeah, I do, and it's not my job. So
it's too much fun, and yeah, I get requests all the time from our panelists, from readers, like, hey, you need to do this course next. You need to do this course next. But, it takes months of coordination between getting someone out to fly the drone for 5 days. They have to time it with the weather. So, it's the best video, and make sure it's not disturbing play at the golf course, and then getting the script to write the narration, finding someone good to do the narration. So it's one of our favorite things that we've developed in the last couple of years, for sure.
I love it. I just keep, every time I just see those videos, or right now I'm just scrolling through like the 100 greatest courses list, and I just every course,
what's your bucket list, Rick? What's your next the next couple of courses you want to play?
So what would be very high on my list would be so I Marion would be high because I don't think I appreciated it at the time.
Sure.
I think it was just like, we go to a lot of different golf courses, and I know this one's old and has history, and I don't think I really appreciated it. Right. So that would be high on the list. Riviera is very high on my list. Just being, not from Southern California, but spending a lot of time in Southern California and going to the event there. And I've had like, I almost had like an emotional experience when I was at Riviera. Like it
Yeah.
was like Thursday morning before the event. The sun was coming up. This place is unbelievable. And I'm like, like, this is amazing. So those two are definitely on the very short bucket lists.
Yeah, I'm with you for Riv. I've gotten to walk it too for a tournament, haven't gotten to play it. And yeah, I mean, knowing all the history with Ben Hogan, you're just like in this little, the valley of, with all the houses above and the trees. It really is an emotional place. So yeah, that's on my bucket list too.
It's phenomenal. Okay, so every 2 years, Steve, we get now. Do you alter? Does the greatest course list come out at the same time as the public courses, or do we alternate years on that?
It's the same year. We alternate. Our world list will come out in between those years. So next year will be our international list. And then like the best in state, public, and 100 greatest all come out in the same year. So it's the same set of data that determine all those rankings.
Awesome. And is there anything before we get out of here, anything that we haven't covered that we should have, anything that you want the people to know about? I don't care what it's about, anything you want.
I'm trying to think. I mean, the international list is something to keep an eye on next year. And we're also developing this international panel. That's a new thing. So currently how we do it is a little less scientific than the US and Canadian list. So we're kind of expanding that internationally next year, in the next couple of years. So if anyone's listening to this and they play a lot of golf overseas, we're currently taking applications for that world panel. So, shoot me an email and you could get considered for our first ever Golf Digest International panel.
Wow, there you go. Steve Hennessey, Golf Digest, host of the Be Right Pod, S_Hennessey GD on Twitter. Give him a follow. Steve, I'm stoked. You and I have gotten to know each other over the last 18 months or so. I'm stoked we were finally able to go one-on-one and talk about this list.
Absolutely. Me too. We could have done another hour. I'm glad we're keeping it short for the viewers.
I know. I love it, brother. I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Rick.